Hey everyone, in this training video, we're going to show you how to operate a standard electric forklift. Check this out. Everyone, today we're going to be going over a Counterbalance electric forklift. Now this is a pretty standard electric sit-down forklift that I'm going to go over. We're using a Unicarriers model here, but you'll find most manufacturers, the controls are very similar here. Now at the beginning here, I'll tell you, I'm not an expert. I think you've seen my other videos. I've run a forklift. I can definitely go over the controls, but I would not claim to be an expert. Hopefully some people are watching. If you have tips or tricks for what you may have learned, please put in the comments below. Now we are at a very controlled environment here, so we've kind of already done our pre-op inspection on the forklift. We know the site we're in, but I think I also say in videos, you're not going to watch this video, not any other YouTube video. It's going to make you an expert on running a forklift. The only way you get really good at anything is practice. So that's the number one thing I'll tell you, is just getting some seat time, kind of in a controlled environment. It's always best to learn. So let's go ahead and we're going to go over this machine real quick. So again, it really starts with a pre-op inspection. Now we've already done that. We've already been running this machine, and this video is not going to be a pre-op inspection, but I do like to tell people, before operating any piece of machinery, you always want to walk around, check it out, just make sure there's nothing that sticks out. With any pre-op I've seen with construction equipment or whatnot, some people get intimidated. You don't need to be a mechanic. You don't need to know how to break down this forklift. You do need to use common sense when you look at something and just see it doesn't look right. For any of these machines, you obviously want to check the manual ahead of time, make sure you know what all the different pieces do, but you should be able to walk around it. Now, starting on the front of this with the forks, these are pretty standard no matter if it's a stand-up, sit-down, cherry picker machine, whatnot. Typically the forks are going to be adjustable, so you'll see pins here that you can slide these in or out one way or the other. So generally you do want to make sure these are locked in place too before you start. And then I'm also just looking while I'm up front and make sure there's no damage. Now, this is an electric forklift. Now, you'll see this similar model. Usually it's propane or electric. Now, really, operationally, they're very, very similar. And really, I don't know if there's a strong way one way or the other. Usually electrics are going to be used in situations where it's a single shift. Obviously, batteries need to be recharged. Some machines, other forklifts, they can pull the whole battery pack out and replace them, but usually the propanes are really easy. If they're running these machines 24 hours, propane's really great because you can just put a new tank on there and keep that machine running a lot. The other thing may matter on the environment you're in. Usually any kind of food factory, warehouse, anything like that, they generally don't like to use the propane because it does have some emissions to it. They also have to be different ventilation in there, whereas electric's a lot quieter, obviously doesn't have any of those emissions. So there's a few different factors there. Propane also will typically be able to lift a little bit more, have a little bit more power, a little bit faster than electric. So there's some of those things that go into it, but overall, the controls that I'm going to go over today are very similar. Now, other than electric and propane, the other thing you're going to notice with most forklifts, they're either four-wheel or three-wheel. They're always going to pivot at the front, so all forklifts are going to steer from the rear. That gives them better maneuverability. Now, the difference, like this is a three-wheel machine, so you'll see we've got one tire here in the center. You know, the advantage to a three-wheel machine, when you're dealing with one single steering wheel there, it turns even tighter than a four-wheel. The four-wheel is obviously, when you move those points out there, it's just a little bit more stable because it's got a little bit wider base where it's connecting with the ground. So that's the difference with those. And then finally, looking at this one, on any forklift, they're going to have a plate or some indicators. You want to know your machine's lift capacity. What's the most it can lift? This one's is 3,600, 3,650. So understand that. Also understand with physics, with anything, and you've seen this in other videos, the higher up, the less stable that machine is. So regardless what the weight capacity is, you want to understand that low and tight is really the best strategy because you're going to be a lot more stable there. Outside of that, like this one is an electric, just understanding your machine. So on this one, there is a release there, and these are the battery. This is where we would plug it in and everything to charge underneath here. Okay, now after we've done the walk around to get in the machine, I like to get, I call it driver's side, it's the left side generally. Usually your controls are always going to be on the right. It doesn't really matter, but just obviously making sure. 3 points of contact anytime you're getting in and out of a machine, so right in there. And then from there, the seat belt. Okay, so now that we're in the machine, before I turn it on, you just want to make sure you've got free range of motion on all the controls there. So with the sit-down electric forklift, steering wheel, it's very similar to a car. Obviously, you're dealing, we'll talk about steering when we get going here. It's a little bit different on how they steer, but usually the easiest thing, you're not doing it with two hands. You got one hand, you got the one little knob there that'll turn the steering wheel. On this, we got our shifter, forward, neutral, reverse on the side of it, and then lights and everything will be on the right side. Keys right there. The three controls you're gonna have, always the one on the left is always gonna be your up-down for the forks. The one in the center is always going to be your tilt, so tilting it back or forward. And then the final one on the right is going to be your side to side on the forks. The final thing, sometimes you'll see a machine with a fourth one. That's going to be your extension. So sometimes you can extend the forks out. So if it's a reach machine, you'll usually have that. Or if there's an accessory, sometimes you'll see clamps on them. The fourth one, if you have it on there, is usually going to be some kind of accessory on the machine. And then on that, there's a parking brake that I'll show you in a moment when we turn the machine on. The keys right there. And then with electric, just two pedals. So you're going to have a gas. I say gas, it is electric, but that's going to be your forward back, and then you've got a brake pedal right there. You will see in a gas machine, you typically will see a third pedal. They call it like an inching pedal. It's kind of where the best way to explain it, it's like a clutch almost, that you push that in and it's going to put you into neutral. And the reason that's important on a gas machine, typically to make those hydraulics go faster, that up and down, you're going to want to be giving it a little bit of throttle to raise that up. That's what will put you in neutral. And then also parking brake levers. Obviously this one's got a switch. You'll also often see a lever on left side or right side to stop it. Okay, from that point we've done the kind of pre-op inspection, and the key on the right here, we will turn that on. And then I have my display down there. It's going to tell me the battery, how charged it is, any other indicators, any warnings, things like that, to make sure we're ready to go. From there, everything's good to go. The parking brake's still on, but before I go to move the machine, just going over the controls. Again, this one on the left is going to be my up, down. If I pull back, it's going to raise it up. As hard as you pull these controls, that's how hard it's going to go up, how fast it's going to go up. The key here is also understanding before you get started, understanding the max height of the machine and where you're at. I know the warehouse I'm in, I can go up to max. You'll hear this thing actually at the very end, it'll kind of hit it hard. Generally, you try and hit those stops if possible. If you have to slow it down a little bit, you don't just want to jam that thing every single time. So that's all the way up, and then if I push forward like this, it'll bring it down. Obviously looking for obstructions, anything underneath that, like that. Usually you're lowering when you have a pallet about 4 to 6 inches off the ground is what you want to be. The final on this machine, the horn is right on the left side. There's a little right there. That's the horn. Anytime we're changing motion in a warehouse, things like that, we want to make sure we let people know that we're coming. So that's that one. The middle one's going to be the tilt of those forks. So if I pull back, it's going to pull back on those. If I go forward, it will go forward with them. Typically, the reason you're going to use that is after you get a load, when you're traveling with it, you usually want to tilt it back just a little bit. Using that kind of momentum and the physics there, you want to kind of keep it pulled, the weight of that pulled into the back of your forks here, the base. That's going to be just a little bit more stable and secure on there than having it hang down. The other thing you may see is if when you're going to pick up a pallet or anything, if you see one side's tilting back or forth, that's the little adjustments you'll be able to make there. And then finally, on your right one is going to be your left to right on there. You'll see if I pull back on it, it's going to go to the right. If I push up on it, it's going to go to the left. This one's most important. When you're up loading a pallet, you might just have to make some fine-tune adjustments to either fit it in or pull it out. And that's where you're just going to use that to go back and forth. Now, driving. Again, steering right here, the left, you'll see this will be the wheel in the back will tell. I actually have an indicator on this display. Usually an electric machine with that single wheel in the back will have some indicator setting that will tell you what direction. So I can see by the lines here which way my tire is, basically direction is facing there. So right now I'm straight. And it also gives me an indicator the parking brake's on. So from there, foot on the brake, parking brake off. I have a switch over on the left, takes off the parking brake. And then I've got my shifter on the left. I've got forward, this is clicking it up. one click down neutral, and then one reverse. And then from there, I'm on the brake, we'll put it in forward. If I push a little bit on that throttle, that's where I'm gonna go forward. And then when I let off, it will still, you see how it comes to a stop, but it still rolls a little bit. And then put it in reverse, same thing. Always looking behind you. You also have mirrors on these machines, looking where you are going. So that's that. Now, really, the key here is for driving, understanding the dynamics of rear steering. So if you haven't done that, that's the biggest thing that a new operator needs to practice. Your pivot point is in the front. So if you know where those two wheels are, those are fixed, you've got to understand that's what you're steering off of, those don't move. So if I go forward here, and if I just turn this hard right, you will see it will turn, but my back end swings around. And it'll literally do a 360 there all the way, and then I can straighten it back out. And vice versa, if I go left, it'll turn left. Now reverse is always a little bit confusing on these single wheel machines, is understanding that it's almost a little bit opposite world. So right now I'm turning the steering wheel left, turning the steering wheel to the right, and my front is going to the left. So it's a little bit opposite. That's where I think getting stick time takes a little bit of practice on this. Put it back in neutral, and then forward. From there, in this episode, we're not actually gonna go over putting pallets on. There's a lot of other techniques we'll cover in a future episode. Just wanna go over some of the basic maneuvers. What I highly recommend is just getting out in the open and practicing driving and the pivot points, the stopping, understanding it still moves a little bit. I do a pivot point drill where I lay out some cones, and then I also have a tight area to fit through. Really valuable to do that out in an open area. It's obviously, make a mistake hitting a cone, things like that. It's a lot better than when you're in the real world with pallets or with people around. So really simple maneuver, and if you don't have cones out there, you can find out, you could use a box. It really doesn't matter, but set something out in an open area and just practice, practice, practice. So I'm in forward here. You'll see I'll go forward here, and then it's just understanding my pivot point. I know my front wheel on the left right here, so once I'm around, I can spin that, and I'm just trying to keep that wheel hugging right around that cone. Once I'm around it, I'm straightening back out, and same thing. Hugging that cone, I can do a 360 on this. And a lot of it's just practicing things like that. Then after you get better at that, you can start really practicing by putting in tight areas. So like here, if I have two cones, I'm going forward, watching my front, and then just turning that hard in, and then trying to straighten it out right before I go through the two cones. And then always understanding that when you swing, you're steering that out the back there. So you're gonna swing that around a little bit. So you have to understand your distances on both sides. A lot of that, and then also going a little bit faster. Speed comes with time. So in the new beginner, go slow. But then we start doing some of that in reverse. So now if I stop it, and you'll see with an electric machine, you shouldn't necessarily need to use the brake. The machine will stop kind of on its own. So you really shouldn't have to use a lot. It's only if you're going really fast, you need to stop suddenly. Now, I'm gonna put it in neutral, I'm gonna put it in reverse. Obviously looking where I'm going. But this, I need the front end to go to the left, so I'm turning the steering wheel to the left. I'm sorry, turning the steering wheel to the right, and my front end's going to go to the left. And then I'm kind of looking. Same thing. Now my pivot point is right there. I'm straightening it back out. Pivot point. And then right there, I know my pivot point's right there. I can straighten it out and go straight through. And you'll see how if I let off, it stops, and then putting it back in neutral. Now, typically on any of these forklifts, there's a reason, there's a little knob there, and I know some people get a habit of driving with their right. You really, as a new operator, try and master that with your left. The reason is, as we go further in other training videos, when we start picking up pallets, you're gonna want that right hand free so you can do controls. That's your 3 controls there on that. And then sometimes it's practicing that harder stop with the brake if it's needed. Then once you're gonna park that machine, stop it, make sure it's in neutral. Make sure your forks are down on the ground, as flat as you can get them. You don't wanna leave a tripping hazard there. And then after that, I'm in neutral, put my parking brake on, and then I'm gonna turn that machine off. 3 points of contact. And that's our entry-level training video on how to operate an electric sit-down forklift. So again, hopefully any operator who run these regularly, I'd love to hear comments from you. Please comment below, tips or tricks, mistakes you made, things like that. Again, check out our other videos on our website. We'll have other additional videos for the forklift. Thanks a lot for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.